Hello everyone, I am Tacit, and today I'm going to be going over a comprehensive skill tier list for all of the skills in Oldschool Runescape and comparing them to that of Brighter Shores. So both of these are MMOs made by the same original creator of Andrew Gower. Of course, Runescape way back in the day, all the way back in 2001 or so, started playing around 2003 or so myself. And then there was things like Brighter Shores, which is not yet released. However, it is still currently having a closed beta that some people were able to get access to, as well as its release right around the corner on November 6th, less than a week away. So I haven't really seen anyone do a video kind of comparing all of the skills between the two games, and while they are planned to be completely different games, they will still have, a decent amount of overlap here and there. They're point-and-click medieval adventure games. They're going to have a lot of overlap made by the same original creator, so, a lot of inspirational things. Well, he's probably improved things over time and kind of changed how he wants to structure some things after 20 plus years and technology advancing and all that kind of stuff. There are still similarities that are going to be within both games, and they're worth comparing, even though this is Brighter Shores definitely try to be a bit more of a cozier game and appeal to quite a bit of a different audience, probably a lot less combat oriented and stuff like that, but there's still going to be enough overlap, so we could easily end up comparing the two. As far as our experience overall with Oldschool Runescape, we are decently experienced. As we mentioned, we've been playing for 20 plus years. This is the hardcore that we ended up making last year, and we have since ended up maxing the hardcore, our first ever Iron Man account. Hardcore is basically a self-sufficient account that needs to never die. Well, at least as far as a hardcore needs to never die, so you keep the little red helmet thingy. But we have gotten quite a bit of progress since then. We have gotten top 25 for collection log, which is basically how much of the total items in the game you've completed, as well as top 25 in multiple different boss kill counts. So we're pretty well rounded in most aspects of the game, though we have always been associated to that of probably a skiller. If we saw this, or if anyone saw our hardcore die, even with all the boss kill count, they'd probably still say that we're a skiller overall. I've been also over the years mostly playing defense pure skillers. If you've ever seen someone like Rendy on YouTube, he's probably the most notorious defense pure skiller out there. But I made quite a few of them over the years before summoning even existed, as well as summoning defense pures when they existed, as well as just defense pures and Oldschool Runescape in general. So I've always kind of liked that unkillable skilling kind of aspect. So I'm really definitely looking forward to the Cryo Knights in that of Brighter Shores. But anyways, let's start now and start getting into this tier list. Sorry if I do cough a little bit. I have been very, very sick the last week. It's why I didn't bother getting the beta access to the Brighter Shores. I just thought I'd be far too sick to bother really covering it. But because we don't have access to it, we have the benefit of course, not being under NDA. As there's a lot of NDA right now as far as people not being able to talk about stuff with Brighter Shores. They know too much information. However, we don't currently know that too much information. So we're just going to go and try to go over all the information that we have publicly when we end up mentioning what we will about these skills, and to see what we can scrap together as far as a tier list here. So the first skills I wanted to start with here are actually not skills at all, oddly enough. So we're going to be starting with the three non-skills that are still, I feel like, worth mentioning, just because of how defining it will end up being in Brighter Shores, so kind of comparing it to that of the non-Brighter Shores version in that of RuneScape. So the first one that we have here is, of course, just the skilling icon for that of Oldschool RuneScape. However, for this, we are representing the Artisan skill. So the Artisan skill was originally the first new skill that Oldschool RuneScape, I believe, back in the day was supposed to get, though back in the day, all polling back then pretty much always failed, so it didn't end up making it. However, nearly half the content that was supposed to be an Artisan has, in one way or another, pretty much made it into Oldschool RuneScape. It is essentially a skill like Slayer, but for skilling, where you will get tasked to do various things, and you end up getting, various rewards for that. And we've seen this in many, many ways already implemented, even directly into that of Oldschool RuneScape. We see these with things like Hunter contracts, which now all your Hunter can basically be done through a complete contract system, where you just get a task over and over and over again, with even a block system, kind of like Slayer, not exactly the same, but still has a block system, all that kind of stuff, and quite a few other things too. So we have this with farming contracts, where you basically go and have farming cycles, where you go do a contract. If it's too strong, you just make it slightly weaker, and then just go plant whatever it ends up telling you, wait till it grows, check on it, rinse and repeat. And we even have things like even construction could be considered almost a contract-like system. You go to a place, they give you a contract to go fix up a house, you go fix up the house, you get a reward, so on and so forth. So there's quite a few instances of this already within the game, and honestly, as far as what does exist within Oldschool RuneScape, as far as Artisan is concerned, the non-existent skill, it is pretty good. I personally enjoy it. Hunter contracts have definitely made Hunter a lot better. It gets to give you a lot of rewards. Really good for early game Iron Man, and late game you can just go do it to just get the pet, a little bird. And overall, I just personally really enjoy the concept of what Artisan is. However, there is a good chance Brighter Shores is going to do it way better. So, Brighter Shores, the version that they have is also not a skill. It is not a skill at all. There's not like an artisan skill or some other similar thing. However, what they are called in Brighter Shore are bounties. So essentially what bounties are, I believe you've seen on the screenshot they'll be able to hold about 8-ish bounties or so. I'm not sure if you can hold more over time or if you have to earn to be able to even get to the point where you can hold these. But this is basically Brighter Shore's version of what Artisan really should have been in Old School Runescape. So essentially, you're going to be able to go and get various tasks for seemingly every single skill in the entire game, from combat skills all the way to every single individual skill. And essentially, you go do whatever that task is. You go and, well, first you need to go and end up getting a bounty. As far as all the ways to get it, we don't really know, but you'll probably be able to find them around town. There'll be areas even marked on your map where you'll be able to see like a bounty icon or something. You'll go to it, you then go and get your bounty, you then go do the bounty. But essentially, you go and do various tasks that could range from any single skill. It might be, hey, go cook 4 of this one dish and then bring this to this person in this town. Or, hey, go fix up this person's house with like this carpentry skill where you go and like build something. Or with the stonemasonry skill, maybe go like repair this pillar in this one area, you know, go collect like X amount of this resource, go do pretty much anything. You could even be just like kill X of something. Could literally be a Slayer task. Like, hey, go kill like 10 of these things in this area that's like bothering this area or something. It's going to cover pretty much everything. And from what we've seen from the reward space, it does seem like it's mostly going to be EXP and gold. But of course, this could be absolutely anything. They could reward absolutely anything through the system at all. And it seems like it's going to be the main way that you pretty much get extra EXP for every single skill. You're pretty much just going to go and wait until you end up seeing a bounty in any given location, go and take every single bounty or until you run out of bounty slots. And then just as you're passively doing whatever you're skilling, you probably want to prioritize most of these and just kind of go around, gain a ton of EXP, ton of gold, ton of everything. And overall, sounds like it's going to end up working out really, really, really well. I'm really looking forward to this system, and it seems like it's probably going to be one of the biggest gameplay loops where you're essentially just doing bounty after bounty after bounty. We don't really know if they're going to be that spammable. It definitely seems like it might be for some skills, like the detective skill, as it seems to play a little bit heavier of a role, where it's like almost one of the main primary ways of really training the skill, whereas a lot of other skills, obviously there's a lot of other ways, but I don't know. We'll have to kind of wait and see on this, but I do feel like the overall bounty system is going to be really, really solid, and probably one of the bigger overall key points that's going to be pretty decent about Brighter Shores. The other thing I am really looking forward to is that of passive experience. This is not a skill, of course. This is just simply passive activities that you can end up doing. But I do feel like this will be one of the things that pretty much help define what Brighter Shores really is. Of course, there are a lot of idle games out there as far as on the market and everything. However, there aren't too many MMOs that do like go really heavy into the idle systems as far as what you're able to utilize. And this could be really interesting because it seems like you'll be able to go and train any skill in the entire game passively that you basically don't want to train. So if you hate rune crafting in something like Old School Runescape, it's essentially you would just go to a location, you would just log off at that location, and then boom, you would just passively get EXP. Old School Runescape actually unintentionally added passive EXP like this when the Desert Treasure 2 bosses ended up coming out last year. So they ended up adding 4 new bosses. One of them was Duke Succulus, and basically there's like a whole little mini skilling thing that you have to do before you go and activate the boss. And one of those that you end up doing is mining like some kind of salt thingy from the wall. And it gave a very small amount of experience, 5 at a time for about 10,000 XP per hour, which to put in perspective, that is about 10% the rate that you could be getting if you were actually doing proper mining. However, if you simply just clicked put something on your space bar and just went away for 6 hours, because that's the log out timer, it takes 6 hours before your character is automatically logged out, you would go and mine there with one single click for 6 entire hours, and you would then get 60k mining XP, which still isn't like the greatest. That's like a half an hour of efficiently mining overall, but you know, that's better than nothing for one single click for what would otherwise have been 0 XP if you were just logged off the entire time while you're at work or sleeping or, you know, anything else like that. And that is basically what Brighter Shores is adding, but for every single skill, and you'll probably get actual resources that you'll end up needing. And yeah, it might actually be a good rate. We don't currently know what kind of rate is. Speculation is like it'll probably be like 10% or so, like the example we just mentioned, but it could be higher, could be 20%, could be 25. I highly doubt it'll be as low as 5%, but you never really know. But regardless what it is just passive free XP for any skill you want. So you can either use it to try to expedite whatever skill you really love and you want to try hitting the end game for it a little bit quicker, or you could just do it on, you know, your least favorite one. Let's say you end up really hating foraging for some reason. You just want to go buy all the foraging supplies from other people. Well, hey, you just go and simply just go to some kind of location. You just plop it there, you just log out, boom, and you just get a ton of passive XP over time. Really looking forward to see how this overall ends up working out. The next big chunk of content I want to go over now is all of the combat skills, which is this entire top row over here, which I'm actually kind of surprised all of them fit into one single one. And I guess technically Slayer, but it's basically a combat skill. But anyways, so let's start all the way from the top here. So Prayer. Prayer, I would definitely say, is one of the more game-defining things that Old School Runescape ends up having. Pretty much the entire system of the game is ran on ticks, where every 0.6 seconds, a game tick will occur. Essentially, the game runs at a 100 beat per minute rhythm game is essentially what Old School Runescape is, and the lifeblood of that 100 beat per minute rhythm game is Prayer, where you can go and alternate prayers, get everything that you're being attacked by offset on what tick they're on, and essentially just pray against every single one of their attacks. There's a lot of extra little damage buffs, a lot of little extra little mechanics that you can end up doing, and I would say by far is probably the most unique form of damage mitigation that is probably in any MMO overall. A lot of other games go about around the more standard route, and I'm pretty sure Brighter Shores even will as well, where they go, you know, like damage mitigation, stuff like that, you know, armor that gives you higher HP, armor that gives you more just outright mitigation, stuff like that. In Old School Runescape, the way that defense and everything else ends up working is it's basically dodge. It essentially just increases your dodge rate, not actually like any kind of damage mitigation or something like that. Like you're as tanky at, or you'll take as much damage at level 1 as you will at 99 as far as when you actually get hit. It's only the actual prayers and stuff that really mitigate stuff. There's a few armors and a few exceptions to that too, but almost all actual mitigation in the game is from specifically prayer. So it has essentially become the lifeblood of the game and by far the most important combat skill. With that being said, there is a skill I like better than it though. And that is the one best skill in Old School Runescape already there. We are at Magic. So I feel like Magic was done very, very insanely well in Old School Runescape, between all these spell books, the way that you can swap between them, the way that that works in raids, where you can like use Humidify to fill a bunch of vials and then, you know, like switch over to a more useful combat one, or in the case of like PvP, switching between like teleport block and then going into freezing them, stuff like that. There's just a lot of combinations with it. There's just a lot of really unique spell books. I feel like they're pretty balanced compared to each other, or, you know, as far as all of them at least having use cases for either various skilling, various combat, various anything. And overall, Magic was just handled really, really, really well. And then you combine it with the fact that, you know, rune crafting, which is a bit of course, all the way down there, but it's one of those systems where, you know, in a normal game, you would just have mana. You wouldn't really have like all these like little rune stones and everything else. It just plays out really well. You don't have to worry about a mana system. You don't really have to worry about a cooldown system beyond like the tick system that already exists for every other weapon and everything else. So it just overall works really nicely and is my personal favorite skill in Old School Runescape. As far as the rest of the combat, due to how it works in Brighter Shores, I am just going to be grouping all of these together as basically one big conglomerate skill, and I'm going to be placing it into B tier. Of course, all of these, if we were to go a little bit more specifically into each one, are a bit more unique than simply just average combat skill, but I would say just the standard, just point and click aspect of Old School Runescape, it's pretty average. Obviously, there's a lot of things you could do like movement wise, but I'm not sure if you would really consider the movement system necessarily as also the combat system. It technically is, obviously, in the sense that, you know, movement's important for a lot of content in the game as far as being on the right tile, everything else, but I don't know, I don't really consider that as combat necessarily in the way that like changing prayers is considered combat or casting spells is considered combat. So in that kind of way, I kind of consider it as its own like separate thing, and because of that, most of these skills are just pretty straightforward. Just click on thing, have better gear kind of stuff. It's basically just a stat check, DPS check, and everything else. And we already kind of mentioned armor earlier. Armor is actually, if it was to be its own thing, is probably even lower down. Armor just is really weird with how it works in Old School Runescape, given that it's just basically your dodge chance. A lot of accounts will actually just go and only get one armor because HP actually matters matters a lot more as far as durability is concerned, as if something successfully hits you, they're, going to be hitting your HP directly. Armor does not save you. Like if you're 10 HP but have 99 armor, you are way, way, way squishier than if you had 99 HP with 1 armor. So you'd much rather be 99 HP with 1 armor than the other way around. So it's just one of those weird skills as far as how it's overall balanced. Speaking about weird skills with how it's overall balanced, this is probably one of the most controversial ones. Where's the F- tier? No, just kidding. But no, I would consider Slayer really average. I am definitely one of those Slayer haters. It's definitely not a bad skill. It's really slow. It's very, very slow. But I don't know. It's Slayer, I feel like, suffers, and once we get to the Brighter Shores part here, I feel like Slayer suffers very heavily from there being too much content. It's one of those skills that it feels like it should be split up into multiple different skills, whereas there's other skills that feel like they should be combined into one, like, attack and strafe really don't feel like they need to be separate ones. Obviously, this allows for some pure builds and a couple other things, but realistically, they really don't need to be 2 skills. This is mostly a leftover mechanic from when a lot of skills back when Oldschool Runescape first released were actually double split. For example, there was good magic, good prayer, evil prayer, and then those were just combined. But for whatever reason, out of all the ones that were split into 2 skills that then became one, there's one that never recombined. It was attack and strength, oddly enough, which of course could just be considered your melee skill. But for whatever reason, it was never recombined. So I don't know, kind of weird. But anyways, yeah, Slayer, basically just like a skill requirement for you to be able to kill stuff. You need a certain Slayer level, otherwise you can't touch them at all. And there's a lot of bossing locked behind it, a lot of gear locked behind it, and a lot of money locked behind it because of all that stuff. But overall, I don't know. I just feel like it's really average. It's a really clunky system. It's one that I feel like could really be tweaked a lot. And while it has gotten a lot of updates over the years, I still feel like it could be tweaked very, very much more as far as how the task system works and everything else in regard to it. So I'd put it in the middle of the pack, with its main 2 downsides being the task system, and it's just way too overly bloated with content. With that being said, I do feel like Brighter Shores will fix this, and every single one of its combat skills are basically going to be the fix to this. So keep in mind, this is an absurdly heavy ultra speculation, but from what we have seen so far with Brighter Shores, it seems like every single region that you go to is basically going to have its own combat Slayer system, where you basically have a Slayer level that is also tied to your combat level for every single region. There's technically should be a 4th one here too, but there is no icon or anything else for it. But yeah, there's 4 regions coming out. There's likely going to be 4 of these, and every single new region that comes out, there's going to be another one. Essentially, how this works, to my understanding, keeping in mind, this could be completely off, as a lot of stuff with combat we currently do not know publicly. But from what I can tell, as far as what it seems like going to happen for Brighter Shores, is you're essentially going to have an independent Slayer level that is per region. Which also helps all of your combat. So we don't know exactly how this ties in. So for example, we do know that there are like Slayer icon kind of things on units where, let's say they have this icon right here and they have like level 30. So we could kind of assume like, okay, maybe we need level 30 in order to end up attacking this, similar to how Slayer is, where if you're not high enough of that Slayer level, you can't end up going and attacking that unit. However, unlike Slayer, there's no combat skills. As you can see here, Brighter Shores doesn't have, attack, strength, range, all these kind of other extra stuff. It seems to all be tied to your Slayer level directly. This basically means you won't necessarily like full restart your combat every single region, but this does mean you're probably going to get a pretty fresh start to combat every single time you go to a new region. Like there will be some things that will probably boost you up regardless, like things like quests that will probably do like some kind of standard line of combat, whatever gear you have, stuff like that, whatever stats those end up giving, damage, mitigation, damage, offense, all that kind of stuff. However, as far as stuff specifically per region, your Slayer level every single time you go into a new region, as well as your conglomerate combat level for that region, is essentially going to be 1 every single time. You're essentially starting fresh every new area they end up adding. And I feel like that's going to be a much, much, much better way to end up doing Slayer. That will be engaging every single time, because like Slayer, current Slayer in Oldschool Runescape is kind of weird. Like let's say they add some kind of mid-game content that's level 70. Like you're basically never going to really kill them if you're at like 99 Slayer. But if you end up doing the same thing in Brighter Shores and you have like a mid-game kind of thing that you only require level 70 for, that's going to be very different overall experience, because, you know, that level 70 thing you're actually going to need to kill. You're going to need to kill things even lower than that. You could be in like best in slot gear for other regions and go into this next region and be like, oh, I got to go progress through the whole thing again. You got to go through like the lower range, everything else. And we don't currently know like exactly how this is going to work, but I assume you're going to have a lot less damage, even if you're in like best in slot gear. Like you can have the best in slot gear ever for zone 4, and then zone 5 comes out, you might have a damage mitigation where you're only doing like 90% less or something. We don't really know, but it's all speculation pretty much exactly how this ends up working. But I don't know. I feel like this is going to be really, really solid. The only big downside of this system is it's going to feel very clunky going from region to region, as if this does give you like percent bonus for your overall amount of damage and everything else, it's almost like going into it's like if every single time you went to a different town in Old School Runescape, you basically got reset to a level 3. Like basically like every single region. Imagine if it was like leagues, but every time you went to a new region, you restarted at level 3, but still kept like all of your relics. That is almost like what this will probably end up being. Well, you still have like all your gear and everything, but your stats and how much damage output you can end up doing in each new region is going to be so low. So you're just going to be like obliterating things in like zone 2. I believe this is the zone 2 icon. So you're going to just like be obliterating things in zone 2, and then you go straight to zone 3, the mining district area, and be like, wait, I'm like hitting nothing now. So it's going to feel a little weird, like the backlash of like how low you're probably going to go down on damage. Keep in mind, this of course isn't confirmed or anything, but it does, from what I could tell from footage, everything else, seem like how it's going to be. It's going to be its own little mini Slayer. You have your own little mini combat for every single region, and it basically makes every region fresh. Anyways, feel like I'm rambling on that for a while, but that's basically that. And the entire opposite though end is magic. All 3 of the magic spellbooks in Brighter Shores, I am very concerned with how it is going to be balanced. So basically in Brighter Shores, you will eventually at some point need to make a decision. When this decision is, we do not know, but it can be assumed based on where free-to-play cuts off that you're probably going to have to make that decision before the end of Chapter 2, as Brighter Shores is divided into chapters. It could be 4 chapters at launch. The first 2 are free-to-play, the other 2 are not, and it is very likely that you would have to make this decision either right at the end of Chapter 2 or sometime within Chapter 2. Who knows, it could be in Chapter 1, but probably Chapter 2, most likely. And this decision will affect your account for seemingly the rest of its lifespan. If you plan to play it for another 1,000 hours, another 10,000 hours, whatever that number may be, it will affect you for the rest of time. This is concerning. Obviously, it's not like unheard of for a game to have a class-based system. But for the kind of genres that they're kind of aiming at, like the cozy game crowd and the, obviously, to some degree, you know, people from RuneScape coming over, it's going to be weird being locked to a class system. And I am very, very exceedingly concerned with how they are going to balance this. And I feel like, especially if you're comparing it to something like how it's scaled in RuneScape, where you just have full access to every single spellbook and everything else, you just change as you will. I feel like the magic system is going to feel really limiting. It seems like we'll get like some kind of like standard spellbook kind of thing where, you know, all classes basically can use, but then you're basically going to have an additional spellbook based on your class, and it's just going to feel really weird. It's like if in Old School RuneScape you had to choose between, do you want the Lunar spellbook, the Ancient spellbook, or the Arceus spellbook? And then once you made that decision, you were locked to that spellbook for literally the rest of the game's lifespan, or, you know, for that account. It just seems really weird. Obviously, you do make this decision during leagues, but that's during a limited time game mode kind of thing, where you choose between, you know, if you want to go melee, range, or magic. But to do that for your entire account, I don't know. It just feels like it's going to be really clunky. Out of any concern I have for Brighter Shores, out of the many concerns that people may have, like, hey, the rooms are going to be too small, I personally don't care. The graphics are bad, I personally don't care. Like all those other things that you might be able to like complain about with Brighter Shores, I really don't care about. But one of the things that I am probably like most concerned with, if there was like any one thing, it is they are going to completely botch the balancing on the class system, and it is by far probably my overall just truly biggest concern when it comes to Brighter Shores. Is they're just not going to do the system well, and it's going to cripple the game. And honestly, even RuneScape back in the day had a class system. They had it all the way back in Classic, and they actually scrapped it because it was so horrible. And I am curious if Brighter Shores is going to do something similar, where it's like, hey, we have this class system, and then it's like a few months later, it's like, we'll make it so you can switch between classes and everything else. Because I'm pretty sure they're locked in at start. But I'm pretty sure eventually, like, give it like several months, you'll be able to switch between classes. You'll be able to switch between spellbooks, all that kind of stuff. It will basically be almost a classless system, because I do not feel like they're going to commit to this. I am 100% doubtful they are going to commit to this for the entire lifespan of Brighter Shores, but I don't know. We're just going to have to wait and see. Now, let's get into all of the non-combat skills within the game. So this will be able to go and compare every single one of their similar equivalences to each other, as all of these have a pretty similar, like, one-to-one skill, except for a few all the way at the end. So, yeah, let's start getting into them. The first one we have here is the herb lore skill for both of these. These are the potion making mechanic, essentially, for both of them, where you end up making a ton of potions that you can end up using for various combat and everything else. And it pretty much should go without saying in Oldschool Runescape that this is an S tier skill. These are some of the most strongest things in the entire game, as far as like Serodome Peru, Super Restore, Sanfew Serums, some of the newer things like Prayer Rejuvenation and Aggro Potions, just combat potions in general, maybe eventual overloads when those exist. They exist within the context of raids, but don't exist outside of it like they do in normal RuneScape. But overall, Herb Lore, still S tier skill, pretty game defining, as, you know, a lot of unique potions, a lot of stuff like that, as far as, you know, basically required for gameplay. Trying to go through the game without ever using a single potion would be a pretty hard task to end up doing. Definitely possible. I'm pretty sure there's some kind of restricted Iron Man that is potionless, not to mention a lot of region locked ones that can't even access the Herb Lore skill. But overall, I would say it's a pretty defining skill to the overall old school RuneScape experience, and you're pretty much on a normal gameplay never going to be going through without utilizing a ton of potions, especially later in the games when you start to get to bosses, raids, stuff like that, content that basically requires the use of various potions. Similarly, it should go without saying that Brighter Shores is also going to be S tier in this regard, but honestly, probably even more so. The interesting thing about Brighter Shores is, from what we can tell, there's currently no consumable food in Brighter Shores. The cooking skill in Brighter Shores is used how it is in like a lot of other cozy MMOs, or not cozy MMOs, but cozy games in general, like indie games and stuff like that. But it's used basically purely as a means of obtaining gold. It doesn't seem like it has much other purpose. Like so far, every single screenshot we've seen where you have consumable items, it is always potions. It's every single time it's been potions. So there is a good chance there isn't such a thing as consumable food. It is just all purely potions. So Brighter Shores is going to be all in on potions. It's not going to be like Old School RuneScape where you combo eat a bunch of extra food into a potion, stuff like that. Do like a shark brew kwambon, stuff like that. It's not going to be any kind of mechanic like that. You just go and simply use whatever potions you have, and that's just it. You're not going to have an alternative food source or anything else like that. So it's going to be potentially even more important. Exactly what all the potions do and everything else like that, we don't really know, but it does seem like it'll be your only means of healing a lot of times, since they're going to add lifesteal down the line. Only means of like restoring your stats or any kind of other thing that you might need to end up restoring. Only way to buff, stuff like that. So you're not going to have food alternatives that can really end up doing such a thing. So it'd be interesting to see how this ultimately ends up panning out, since it is a fully consumable potion only kind of system. And that doesn't mean a lot of these other skills are basically just going to be like for profit, which I still have not figured out yet, by the way. If any of you guys know or have speculation, there is one thing. I have a question of the day. If there is any one question I would love for you guys to answer, if any of you guys are watching up to this point, what do you think the gold sink in Brighter Shores is? Because I honestly have not the slightest clue what the gold sink in Brighter Shores is. I really, really want to know, and I'm curious, like after we play like 100 hours in the first week or something absurd, what on earth that is ultimately going to be, because I have not the slightest clue. Every single one of these skills seems like it's just profit, 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 profit. Where do you spend all this money? Especially since it seems like it's going to be pretty minimal on combat when it first releases. Like, where on earth are you dumping all this money? And a lot of the skills, like what we're about to get to, don't seem like they actually scrap money like the ones that do in Old School RuneScape. But anyways, we'll get to that in a second. But yeah, what on earth do you guys think is the thing that will sink money in Brighter Shores? Because I'm really stumped as to what on earth all the money that we're earning from everything is going to. Anyways, farming. Really good skill in Old School RuneScape. Some people might complain that it's really timer based and stuff like that, but I don't know, it's pretty chill. There's definitely games that have done farming better. A lot of games. It's a pretty dated system and everything, but especially on Iron Man accounts and stuff like that, I don't know, it's just really chill doing a farm run, getting a bunch of herbs that then become, or that then become herbs that become your potions and everything. It's a nice gameplay loop that feeds you into one of the better skills in the entire game. So overall, I enjoy it quite a bit. and I don't know, it's really chill. It's definitely not for everyone, but I personally feel like it's pretty good. I feel like the one in Brighter Shores is potentially going to be even better than it. However, we don't really know yet as far as how exactly it's going to be, but foraging is basically farming, but instantly. So technically foraging exists in Old School RuneScape, you just don't get EXP for it. For example, picking flax, foraging, you get no EXP for it though. Things like picking berries, like the Kadava berries or something else for this quest, boom, you just got foraging right there, but you know, you don't get any XP for it. There's a lot of things that you technically forage in Old School RuneScape, but you don't actually get any XP for, and yeah, this is what foraging skill ends up fixing. It's essentially farming but instant, and all of the foraging that already exists in Old School RuneScape, except you actually get XP for doing so. Like imagine if you got like 5 foraging XP every time you picked a flax back in the day in Old School RuneScape, you'd be level 99 already. But yeah, it'd be interesting to see exactly how this ends up ultimately panning out, as it should just be farming without delay. So if you ever go down, one thing I'm really curious to see with this is if it's on like a, because I feel like they're going to try to tie in a lot of skills together in various areas. And one way I feel like they're going to do foraging is there's going to be like a bunch of bushes and other things in an area where you might be just walking by. But there's like timers on like bushes where, you know, you'll like pluck them all, and then it might be like a minute before you can go do it again. So then you'll go do some other skilling activity in the area, and then, you know, you go back to the bush, go pluck it again, and, you know, so on and so forth. Where it's basically whenever you see a foraging supply, you're probably going to want to take it instantly. It's like if you saw something like a Raynor just sitting on the ground in Old School RuneScape for prayer potions, like, oh, you'd want to pick that up immediately. And then if you knew it would spawn like in another minute, you would go do some other skilling activity near it and then go pluck it again. And it seems like what foraging is basically going to end up being in Brighter Shores, where, you know, there's going to be some really important herblore supplies that you need for like the absolute best potions in the entire game. And essentially what you're going to do is you're going to do some skilling activity nearby. Maybe you'll cut some tree, some other thing nearby, mine some rock, and then you go pluck the little foraging thing, and then you wait for it to respawn again, and, you know, just rinse and repeat until you get all the potions that you desperately need while still training all your other skills. So honestly, I feel like, honestly, I'm going to change it. I feel like foraging, if done right, could be better farming. It will definitely be better farming. Let's be real. But I feel like this gameplay loop, if done correctly, combined with how important herblore is going to be in Brighter Shores, as well as pretty much every game, any game that, you know, has potions where that's going to be the main thing you're consuming, probably going to be pretty important. But I feel like this gameplay loop right here, or this into like whatever other skilling you end up doing with it, has a lot of potential to be really, really, really good. And I feel like out of any gathering skill in Brighter Shores, I will personally enjoy foraging the absolute most, more than any of them. Even though I'm probably going to be heading to like the later areas, and I believe this is an early area unlock, probably like the first region or second. I'm not sure if it hasn't been confirmed yet. I'm pretty sure it's first region, but it's definitely one of the first 2 regions you'll be able to unlock this. But I don't know, I feel like it's just going to be such an important, vital part of the game, and I feel like the gameplay loop for it has so much potential, and it has potential to be just one of the overall funnest and rewarding skills, especially when combined with herblore, combine that into combat and everything else. Anyways, construction. Construction is pretty average in Old School RuneScape. It's basically the money sink skill. Money sink skill in the sense that it, by far as any skill, sinks the most amount of gold. It is basically the gold sink skill, especially back in the day. There are ways to obfuscate that these days, like mahogany homes and other stuff like that. However, for the most part, it's still the biggest money sink skill in the entire game, other than like if you were to train like prayer on a main account or something to like expedite it all the way to 99 in like a few hours or something. But generally speaking, as far as an average account, construction is probably going to be the one you dump the most amount of gold into in order to get it max. You do get quite a bit of benefits from it, like getting a bunch of things that you put into your house that have a lot of benefits for bossing and just in general quality of life. But overall, it's a weird skill because you just keep building stuff and then tearing it down and then building stuff and then tearing it down and do that over and over again. However, this system is going to be quite a bit different in Brighter Shores. I don't feel like it's going to be a particularly good skill in Brighter Shores. It's going to be one of those average skills. However, it is broke down into 2 different skills. I only have one icon here because we don't have the icon for either, but it's technically 2 skills in Brighter Shores. It is carpentry and stonemason are the 2 skills that this will be in Brighter Shores. Obviously, both of those are a little bit different. Carpentry, you'll be building a bunch of furniture. I can see it almost being like mahogany homes a little bit, and we're a little slightly where, hey, you need to go build a bunch of furniture for this one place to go do your bounty, and then, you know, go from there. But overall, it's basically just carpentry and stonemason, just building a bunch of stuff related to stone and wood. To some degree, Old School RuneScape, I wonder if they were actually planning way back in the day to make it into 2 skills, because way before construction ever existed, there were planks and then tiles in the wilderness. And to this day, there's still nothing to use all those tiles for, whereas obviously those planks and everything basically became construction, aka carpentry. But the stonemason part of that never really came out, so it's kind of interesting that they basically double divided the skill into two in Brighter Shores. However, unlike that in Brighter Shores, it does not seem like it's going to be a money sink skill at all. It seems like you're going to be earning money. You basically go and use probably a bunch of your wood cutting supplies, make them into furniture, and then sell it. Boom, you make money. And then stonemason, similarly, you get a bunch of mining supplies that you end up getting from mining, and then you go and convert that into stonemason goods. Boom, you can make money from that. So unlike in RuneScape, you're actually going to be going and making money most likely through your essentially construction skill, carpentry and stonemason, compared to in Oldschool Runescape where you're just burning money like it's nothing. Anyways, next we have ourselves thieving question mark. So thieving is pretty bad in Oldschool Runescape. It's basically the carpal tunnel syndrome skill, where all you're doing is just mash clicking over and over and over again every single tick. It's pretty bad. There's a few activities that are pretty fun with it, like pyramid plunder and stuff like that, but overall it's way too click intensive for its own good. A lot of end game quote unquote content for it is just really boring, like pickpocketing Vyres for their blood shards or pickpocketing elves for the crystal shards kind of things. It's just not fun. It's too click intensive. The reward for how long it takes, and if you go dry for hours on some of the bigger drops, just feels so bad. It's really good XP if nothing else, but it just doesn't feel rewarding. Though I guess thieving shouldn't feel rewarding. However, I am really, really curious to see how the detective skill ends up working out in Brighter Shores. So of course, Brighter Shores, with the whole brighter theme, ended up doing the exact opposite of thieving. Instead of being the thief, you are now the detective of all the thieves. And this is definitely going to fall somewhere as an A or S. I feel like it will be S for some people, but it really depends how it will overall pan out, because I feel like it has a lot of reading, and you actually have to do like legitimate detective work where you're going to need to find like a bunch of clues and then go interrogate people, stuff like that. And while it should be pretty straightforward, I feel like it's going to require probably the most reading of any skill out of either of these two games. So if you don't like a lot of reading, this might not be for you. There will still be a lot of visual aspects to it as well, but it definitely seems like it's going to be a little bit more of a reading based skill than some. But I don't know, I feel like it has so much potential, especially for quest tie-ins and everything else like that, where you're basically just going to be like interrogations you could do. There's going to be like clue things you can end up figuring out, and then you'll have a bunch of people that you have to choose from and be like, oh, based on these three clues that you have to deduce which one it is. Who knows, maybe you'll be able to end up solving it without all three clues. If it takes too long to get all the clues, maybe there'll be some kind of alternative way to do that. I don't know, we'll really have to wait and see how this pans out. But I feel like this saw every problem that thieving has and tried to fix literally all of them and then make it into a skill called a detective skill. So I am really hyped for this. Out of any skill, I am the most curious to see how this pans out. I feel like a later tier list of me doing this will probably put this lower down, but I have high hopes for this skill. So for now, I will put it in S. It has so much potential and is probably the most creative skill in the entire game that Brighter Shores is going to be doing. So really curious to see how that pans out. Unfortunately, this isn't like one of the furthest zones. I think it's in like zone 4 or something. Anyways, next, the mining skill. Mining skill is pretty average. I'm not sure where to put it in Oldschool Runescape. I'll probably put it in the middle of the pack. I know some people would probably put it way lower than this, but I feel like it's gotten a lot of quality of life over the years with like things like new AFK activities, like with shooting stars and everything. I'm personally a huge fan of Volcanic Mine, even though that's pretty much considered dead content. Almost never, no one ever does, but it's really good content. You can do it solo now these days as well as in a group. Just overall, just a lot of fun. There's things like Zolkino these days that kind of combines like skilling with a boss kind of thing, and I feel like that was pretty well balanced, and I feel like we need more content like that, like Zolkino. Actually, we saw it earlier when we brought up the Oldschool Runescape thing, but we're using the crystal axe right there, the felling 2-hand axe, but we're using that from good old Zolkino, of course, with the crystal tool seed. Honestly, I wish I didn't get that crystal tool seed. I wish I could still keep doing Zolkino, but I green logged the place, so I don't have any reason to go back. But anyways, I don't know. I feel like mining's decent. It has a lot of good, a lot of bad. I feel like the bad and good kind of just outweighs themselves and just makes it average at this point. But I don't know. Some people would absolutely despise the skill, but I don't know. I personally like it a lot. It just has a lot of bad things, like, 3-tick granite, all that kind of stuff. Like, you kind of have to do it eventually. Like, especially on Iron Man, you definitely got a 3-tick sand in order to do your crafting grind for either 99 or 200 mil. It's just really annoying to have to do, but you do eventually have to do it. So it just kind of just balances out by the end. As far as Brighter Shores, I feel like this has potential, with the biggest reason that I'm putting it into A being I feel like it'll actually matter. So in old school RuneScape, of course, making armor means nothing. Of course, it's more so smithing than mining, but I still feel like it's relevant to mention during the mining part, as they are both two very heavily tied together skills within the game. And I personally feel like that mining will be handled a lot better in Brighter Shores, because the gear you actually make from mining, or more so smithing, is actually going to matter. In old school RuneScape, the equipment you make is basically goes up to rune. As far as thing that you can hit with pickaxe and then convert into armor, the best you can make is rune. This is tier 40 armor. In a game that goes up to like tier 80, 90-ish kind of equipment, like more than double that, it is so insane, the disparity between what you can hit with pickaxe and then make into an armor compared to how good, or more so bad, that armor is. With that being said, smithing is horrible. It just needs to be completely nuked and reworked. This actually was done in normal RuneScape, however, has yet to be done in old school RuneScape. You need 99 smithing, max the skill, in order to end up making tier 40 armor that you're never going to use, especially by the time you can do it. The only like one use case I think smithing has in the entire game is if you're like a free to play only Iron Man or something. Smithing a rune scimitar at like 92 is like the only good thing smithing is used for. It is insane how absurdly bad it is. The only reason I don't put it into D, even though honestly it probably should be there, is it can easily be reworked. And there's some fun mini games with it, like Giant's Foundry and stuff. Like it's not all unredeemable, but it just needs to be completely nuked and reworked from the ground up like it was in normal RuneScape. Is that enough to fix it? I don't know, but I sure hope it is. Anyway, smithing in Brighter Shores, you better be A tier. You better be higher than whatever it is in old school RuneScape. So, of course, we don't know exactly how useful smithing will end up ultimately being, or the gameplay loop or anything else like that in Brighter Shores. However, we can assume it is better than old school RuneScape. You're actually probably going to use some of the equipment. You might not be able to make absolute best in slot, but maybe you'll be able to make some pretty good gear. If they have some kind of enhancement system or something, maybe you'll need like 1,000 of some kind of ore in order to make like, some kind of enhanced version of a piece of equipment. That'll be like a long-term goal, and who knows, maybe that will be better than some of the things you can actually kill enemies for. In old school RuneScape, as far as gear, you only get gear from killing, enemies, bosses, raids, stuff like that. But in Brighter Shores, you might actually be able to skill your way to best in slot gear. There might be a thing where, you refine like 10,000 bars together in order to make like a super ultra mega bar. And then that super ultra mega bar that you need like several of, then ends up making like, your best in slot chest plate, or your legs, or your sword, or something else. It has a lot of potential to be really good. How it's handled in Brighter Shores, we have no clue. For all we know, it could be worse. But you're actually going to use the equipment you smith to some degree. You're probably still going to sell like 99% of it, but you're probably going to be actually using this equipment. It's not just going to be completely dead content equipment that you just literally high alch or just sell to a shop or something else. So be really interesting to see how this overall ends up panning out, but has a lot of potential. And I'm actually really looking forward to doing a ton of mining and smithing. It might actually be the main skills I actually rush, as it's in the first kind of members area that you end up hitting. So all free-to-play players will not have access to this. So really curious to see how strong it'll end up being, since it is a member lock skill to even have access to mining and smithing. So it's definitely going to be useful to some degree. It's actually the first mining skill, or the first member skill, that you're pretty much going to be introduced to, most likely, as the third zone is the when membership starts, as far as like member zones. And the first things that that area is likely going to introduce you to is mining and smithing. So really curious to see how that ends up panning out, especially since they're technically money locking it, so it has to be at least somewhat decent. But anyways, next, cooking. So cooking is a weird one. I would have to say this one is pretty dead too. Similarly to how potions are pretty much the only consumables you need a lot of times. This has kind of also made cooking pretty bad. Cooking is pretty straightforward too. You don't really do much with cooking in RuneScape. You basically just click on furnace, cook item, boom. You like, there's some tick manipulation you could do, 1 tick quam bombs, 2 tick anything else, and stuff like that. However, there isn't like a whole like process you go through, or at least not that you really need to bother with. Like tuna potatoes, yeah, you can go through this whole process and make a thing, but why do that when you just use a raw manta ray on a stove and have the exact same item compared to like a 10-step tuna potato? It's just not balanced that well. And because of that, it's just overall really bad. It's a skill that could definitely use a rework, especially if they want to start adding like higher healing foods. Like start making things that are as complicated as tuna potato or summer pie actually heal for like, 30 or something, some kind of higher heal. Maybe not 30, that's a bit broken, but something higher than the current foods that exist in the game. Make it so a very long process actually matters. Whereas currently best foods are just, hey, just use raw fish on stove, you're good to go. And you can either AFK it or 2-tick it, however you want to do it. And I don't know, it just doesn't have that much variety. However, when it comes to Brighter Shores in this regard, I'm not sure exactly how this is going to pan out. So Brighter Shores is set up in a really weird way as far as how cooking is going to end up being, in that there is a very, very, very good chance you do not consume food in Brighter Shores. You might cook 1,000 dishes and your person might never taste a single one of them. Because as we currently understand, it seems like you only eat potions. It does not seem like foods are really consumable. It just seems like a product that you sell. This is not unheard of for various cozy games where the food you make either just fills up like some kind of stamina meter or barely has any kind of effect. So you just end up ultimately like selling 99% of the food you ever make. But in this case, it seems like you might just sell all of them. One thing I am really hoping that the cooking skill does get, though, if it's just going to be purely as a profit skill, I hope we get timed boosters for cooking. This is something done in JRPGs pretty often in order to force you back to hub towns, where basically, let's say you consume some kind of food and it will give you an hour buff. Let's say in the context of Brighter Shores, this gives you like a 10% mining buff. You'll get 10% more XP and you'll get 10% chance of getting like an extra ore. This is a mechanic that likely will not exist in Brighter Shores, but I kind of wish it did, so that eating food, actually mattered. So, like having some kind of temporary bonus. And that would also make it so you can't just like camp an activity for an endless amount of time. For example, I am currently just woodcutting over and over again. Of course, on the Oldschool Runescape, I need to go bank. I just keep talking, so I haven't banked yet. But, you can infinitely camp that piece of activity. I could literally just keep doing that tree over and over again, hit the deposit box, go back to the tree over and over and over again, and just keep doing that pretty much indefinitely. There's nothing really stopping me just from doing that for forever. But, if there's some kind of consumable food where it's like, oh, hey, if you go and consume this food, you'll have 10% more woodcutting XP and 10% more logs that you'll end up getting from the tree. So if you end up doing this food, hey, you'll gain more of a benefit during this time. So, it'll actually be worthwhile to stop every hour, 2 hours, however long the boost lasts for, go stop what you're doing, go back to the hub town, go for a little dinner that gives you that buff, and then, then go head back. So, I don't know. I kind of wish that kind of mechanic ends up existing, so there isn't a reason to go and camp an area for 100 hours, 1,000 hours without ever leaving. It's nice, especially in an MMO, to kind of have like a hub area where, you're kind of forced to have to go to back every so often. So if they have like, diners where you can end up consuming some of that food and, get the buff and all that. I don't know. I'm curious to see what they end up doing with it, but it seems like initially it is just going to be a for-profit skill with food that you can't even consume yourself. But personally, I would love to have various buffs that you can end up having for it that just last for a small amount of time that can kind of encourage you to go back to hub towns and everything. But I don't know. That's just speculation. That is a mechanic that likely doesn't exist and is just purely for selling stuff. Anyways, the 2 woodcutting skills. Hey, speaking of woodcutting, so where do I put woodcutting? Woodcutting is so chill. Honestly, it is my favorite. If this was a tier list on how much fun am I having, S++ tier. Woodcutting is just such a chill skill. I don't know. It's just something about just hitting a tree and getting logs that is so undescribably satisfying. And it is just so good. It's like such a basic, underdeveloped skill. But it is just so good to click tree and get log in a way that I do not know how to fully express unless you have felt it yourself, that feeling. And I feel like it's going to be about the same for both of them. There's more co-op and stuff that you could do, like 2 people cutting with like a saw on a tree. So you can almost do like co-op woodcutting with an alt account or something similar, who knows. But I don't know, woodcutting is just such a relaxing skill. And I feel like Brighter Shores is going to do pretty well too, as long as they have click tree, get XP kind of thing. I don't know, it's a really hard to describe thing, but it is just so I don't know, something. It's just such a good skill, and is my personal probably favorite in all of Old School RuneScape. I know this list probably looks a little weird. It's like, if it's my favorite, why is it not S plus? But I'm trying to do it based on like overall kind of like where it fits in the game, and just kind of overall rather than my ultra biased opinion that woodcutting is the best skill in the game. Because obviously it's not, but I don't know. It's just really chill. Anyways, so crafting's I don't know, kind of mid tier in Old School RuneScape. There's a lot of good stuff you end up getting from it. I feel like even more so than smithing. However, it's still really data skill like smithing that just has a lot of problems, and it shares a lot of the very similar problems. But I feel like it's scaled a lot better to modern day compared to how smithing is to modern day. So at least it's still kind of useful, whereas smithing, not really. Brighter Shores version of this, honestly, I feel like it's going to be one of the worst skilling skills. It's basically called leather maker or leather worker. I think it's called leather worker. And oh no, I just don't really see a point in it. You'll basically just work as a leather worker, and you'll get a wage, you'll get paid and stuff. But I don't really understand, other than like a GP skill, exactly what the point is. Honestly, I might even put it into D tier. I think I will put it into the one thing that could be deleted. I could be proven wrong. Maybe leather worker will be like the coolest thing ever and be useful and everything else. But yeah, I'm going to put it down because we haven't put anything in the lowest tier. Actually, we haven't put anything. Oh gosh, we're going to go put some other stuff. Don't worry, there's some stuff to put there soon. But yeah, I personally feel like it'll be the worst skill in Brighter Shores. Will it be? Who knows? We'll have to wait and see. We know like nothing about it. But I don't understand why it exists is the main thing with it. Anyways, but who knows? That'll probably become clearer as Brighter Shores gets released. Next, we have fishing. Fishing is basically woodcutting, but worse. I'm not sure how to describe it. It has the same vibe as woodcutting, but isn't as good. Especially in Old School RuneScape, because food is less useful as well compared to potions. So, I don't know, just very mid. A lot of the activities for it just aren't as good as mining. Honestly, I almost want to put it in C tier, but I don't know. I think if B is fine. It's just really average. It's not great. It's not horrible. Somewhat like fishing, but not as good. I mean, it's somewhat like woodcutting, but not as good overall. However, I do feel like fishing will be a little bit better in Brighter Shores. We've seen you can now actually almost get like little mini boss encounters, kind of like how you used to be able to be attacked by random events back in the day. One of the reasons why you actually used to make defense peer skillers back in the days, they were basically level 3 skillers that never died to random events. Because way back in the day, if any of you guys remember when random events existed, well, they still do, but random events used to attack you. Not only were there things like exploding rocks and trees that would like break your axes and pickaxes, but there were also random events like when you were fishing where you would just be attacked by like a sea monster, and then that sea monster, would start, if you're AFK, you would just start getting attacked by it. And there seems like there's actually going to be activities where you can deliberately try to get attacked in Brighter Shores, where you're like fishing on a dock and a big frog creature ends up attacking you. So it seems like you'll be able to go to these fishing locations where there might be super rare fish, but you'll also have like a little mini boss kind of boss encounter kind of thing where occasionally, you got to be geared up and ready to go, because at any point you could be attacked by like the sea monster and actually have to fight it off. So I don't know. I feel like its overall gameplay loop's just going to be a little bit more interesting than what RuneScape has to offer currently, but we'll have to wait and see. So the first skill for Brighter Shores here, and pretty much the only one that doesn't really have a Old School RuneScape equivalent, is that of the Merchant. So the Merchant is interesting in that it seems like it's going to be replacing High Alchemy and having to go to a bunch of shops for the different sell prices that Old School RuneScape has. There's a lot of mechanics like this or like merchanting already within the game. Like, for example, you could buy silk from one location then sell it to another, so and at a marked up price. So these were mechanics all the way from like 2001, 2, 3 kind of things in like some of the earlier towns, and like Alcarid into Arty and that kind of stuff. But it seems like they were kind of doing it, but similar to like the foraging that exists in Old School RuneScape, it exists, but you don't get EXP for it. But in Brighter Shores, you're actually going to get the EXP for it. And I'm not sure if I should put this in the game defining spot, but I feel like I will. I think I will put Merchant into game defining. It will probably ultimately be a little bit lower than this, but I do feel like it will be game defining how they might end up handling merchanting. So it will include a lot of stuff like bartering with various townspeople, stuff like that. There'll be activities where you have to like bring an item, over to someone, almost like you're almost like delivering mail, the mailman mode, where basically you'll get this like package and it's like, hey, go deliver this to this other guy, and then you go deliver it, and it's like, hey, here's a bunch of merchant EXP and everything. So you'll have to do like some delivery service, stuff like that. But I don't know, it'll be interesting to see how this works. It's likely going to be replacing the high alchemy system and having to use different shop system, as I mentioned earlier. The way that it works in Oldschool Runescape, you use magic to high alch stuff while you're doing combat and other things. And in the case of Brighter Shores, instead of having to do that, you actually have a skill that you gain XP for and everything. So I don't know, it'll be interesting to see exactly how it pans out. Ultimately, will end up being good or not. That is yet to be determined. We'll figure that out. Obviously, once it comes out, as very little is currently known as far as, super specifics as far as it as with all this Brighter Shore stuff. But I don't know. I'm really curious to see how it ultimately pans out, and I do feel like it has potential to be one of the better skills in the entire game. You know what isn't one of those better skills in the entire game, though? Agility in Old School RuneScape. So honestly, if I was ranking this based on Hollowed Sepulcher alone, S tier. This is such a good minigame. But if I was to put into consideration the entirety of what agility is in Old School RuneScape, it is just so clunky. Its XP rate's pretty slow. There's a lot of boring activities that you basically have to do in order to get to Hollowed Sepulcher, as the skill is basically the Hollowed Sepulcher skill now, as you basically, that's the only thing that matters. Everything else is just like nothing compared to Hollowed Sepulcher. It just scaled very weirdly. They're reworking how run energy works, which is actually going to make agility to some degree even worse, because they're basically deleting run energy from the game. Not literally, but pretty close to it. So, I don't know. It's just in a really clunky state. They are doing some more reworks to it, but those reworks are almost going to make the skill less relevant, not more relevant in a sense. But it's interesting in the sense that it is game defining how run energy works. Honestly, I should have made like another tab that's literally just like movement and run energy / run energy, or more so the movement system. Because honestly, movement system, Old School RuneScape, S tier. Which is one of the reasons why Hollowed Sepulcher is also S tier, because it's all movement system based. It's why things like Zolkino and stuff is pretty good too in mining, as it's all movement system based. Like the movement system in Old School RuneScape with the tick system and everything else, really, really fun. However, that's not what agility is. The agility system, if you were to rank it as a movement system, S tier. But if you were just to rank all the skilling activities and everything else, it is one of the worst skills in the game. Not the absolute worst, but pretty far down there. Anyway, speaking of absolute worst, hello, fire making. Fire making is in the category where you could click the delete button and no one would notice. There are a few unlocks that you do get from it that are like decent, like getting the lantern for Guardians of the Rift minigame, or being able to go get the best shades for the Shades of Morton minigame. But as far as the overall skill, it is just so pointless. This is why Brighter Shores, of course, doesn't have a one-to-one equivalence here. There just is not a reason to. Similarly, fletching, mostly due to the bow Faradinin, as well as the best in slot bow of the Twisted Bow. The bow Faradinin requires no ammo, and the Twisted Bow requires almost no ammo. And it has basically killed fletching because you barely ever have to fletch anything, because you just very rarely consume any arrows or anything else. I guess the thing that most consumes stuff is blowpipe, but you're going to run out of your Aura scales way before you're going to run out of darts. So even then, like, it's just in a really weird state and could definitely use a huge overhaul, even more so probably than smithing, even though smithing really needs it too. It's just in a really weird state right now where if you just deleted it and just simply got the ammo, you wouldn't even notice fletching doesn't exist. It's also basically a 0-time skill almost, just because of how much multi-skilling you could do with it, similar to magic and such, where you just get so much free XP for doing almost nothing, and you feel like you almost have to always do it because it's just free XP. I don't know, it's just in a really weird state. Hunter is one I wish Brighter Shores would get an equivalence of. They probably will at some point. I'm really curious to see what Andrew Gower would do with a modern version of Hunter. And honestly, I really enjoy Hunter, especially with the contracts that you get through the bounty system that basically has. Really solid. It basically got the whole artisan system attached to it and is just a lot of fun. I really enjoy it. A lot of activities for it, just kind of chill in general, like doing herbivore and stuff. Has like same vibe as hitting tree kind of thing. Just really chill activities. Also, I really like drift net fishing, which is the exact opposite of chill, though it's still kind of chill, and combines fishing and hunter together in a pretty chill way of getting XP, even though it's really click intensive, but it's a lot of fun. And overall, I enjoyed it a lot. And out of any skill that's in Old School RuneScape that doesn't have a one-to-one equivalent right now in Brighter Shores, this is definitely my top pick for needs to be in Brighter Shores at some point, but we're fine to be actually good. Because Hunter is a really dated skill, and while they've done a lot of work, the Old School RuneScape team, to try to bring it up to date, there's still so much jank with it that if you do it completely from scratch, like in Brighter Shores, you could make it one of the better skills in the game. So I'm curious to see how that ends up panning out. Speaking of one of the better skills in the game to end up ending it out with, I somewhat alluded to this earlier when it came to magic, but honestly, rune crafting. I know this is probably a controversial one. If you were to actually tier this to a lot of other people, it'd probably be in like C or D tier. But I feel like rune crafting is probably one of the most defining skills in RuneScape. And the main reason for this is mostly due to things like the lore of the game, just being able to go and create all of your runes in general instead of having a mana system, just be able to go and craft it. It's generally always been the best moneymaker in the entire game as far as skilling is concerned, not specifically combat, but as far as non-combat stuff, it is always notoriously been one of the best moneymakers because you always need magic in order to, you always need runes in order to supply magic. And that kind of gameplay loop between how good magic is in Old School RuneScape combined with having all this lore around rune crafting, having amazing gameplay for rune crafting. I know a lot of people don't like those combination runes or constantly like teleporting and going to a rune crafting altar, but honestly, I really enjoy that kind of gameplay loop. There's a lot of skill that you can end up doing as far as not losing ticks and stuff like that. And it's really repetitive, but like you have to always be like thinking when you're going through, especially with how binding necklaces work. I'm still not sure why they haven't made like a permanent binding necklace that you can keep charging, but they really need to. But there's a lot of things you have to like keep track of, and just overall, honestly, I enjoy it a lot. I know that's a controversial take. Like, rune crafting is fun, but rune crafting is fun and really defining to what Old School RuneScape is, even though I'm pretty sure 99% of players would like to avoid it. And they have tried deleting it too, which some people could see as a benefit. They added the Scar Essence Mine, which basically tried to delete rune crafting from the game by basically making it so you can rune craft with gold instead. So for people that hate rune crafting, hey, you have that too, which could be considered a benefit. You can now completely ignore rune crafting by just spending money on it by doing Desert Treasure 2, going to the Scar Essence Mine part. You don't even need to finish Desert Treasure 2. You just have to go up to the boss. You don't even need to do the boss. You just have to get to that point, and then you go to Scar Essence Mine, and then you can start using money to runecraft everything, and you just get 1 billion runes with money instead of having to ever actually engage with the skill. You still have to do it a little bit, but you barely have to engage with it at all by that point. But anyways, I think that is our final verdict on our Old School RuneScape versus what we currently know about Brighter Shores tier list. Oh gosh, that took forever. It definitely took a lot longer than I thought it would be. But anyways, what do you guys think? I would love to hear your guys' feedback. And with my question I mentioned earlier, definitely the one I want to hear the most. What do you guys think is the money sink in Brighter Shores based on the current knowledge we have? Or any of you who played the early access, if you want to say a little something. But what on earth do you think the money sink is in Brighter Shores? Because after everything I've seen, all the data, all the everything, I have not the slightest clue what on earth you're using all this money on. But hopefully it'll be something interesting. But anyways, yeah, we'll be doing Brighter Shores a ton. We'll be streaming it pretty much every single day when it launches for that first month. Even when leagues come out in Old School RuneScape, I'll just be doing leagues in Brighter Shores simultaneously. We'll be min-maxing in Brighter Shores while just doing leagues and something else. I don't know. But we'll be multitasking all that and everything. But I plan to cover it quite a bit. It's the first Brighter Shores video I've been able to get out, but I do want to still cover stuff. I've just been kind of sick lately with the cough and everything. Trying to edit out the best I can here and there. But gosh, I've been so sick the last week with it, but hopefully I'll get better soon by the time Brighter Shores comes out next week, and we'll be good to go cover a bunch of content on it. But anyways, guys, would love to hear you guys' feedback and everything, and I will catch you guys later. Best of luck with Old School RuneScape and Brighter Shores, and I will catch you guys later. Goodbye, everyone, and thanks for watching.